Namaste. Moving the margins of healthcare business far and wide to embrace each one of you. That's what my task is for the day. But first, let me start with a story from somewhere near Puducherry in South India. You possibly are able to remember the calamity 15 years back when a tsunami struck the coast, South Indian coast. Rani, the tsunami had left 17. Rani, when we finally met her, was 17 years old. It had left her and her brother orphans. In the calamity, let us not be judgmental. With all the aftermath and suffering, her extended family rejected them. They grew up as orphans. At the age of 15, Rani got cancer in her leg. She did not get treatment. Her cancer got treatment. So much so, when eventually it had ulcerated and there were maggots crawling around it, one of the best medical institutions, threw her out, saying there is nothing more we can do. A very kind-hearted person, an alternative medicine practitioner, found her there, took her with him, kept her in his consultation room, and wrote emails to everybody who could find. And one of the emails reached us. We talked to a doctor friend, a palliative care physician in Puducherry. He and his a medical student friend went in search of her. By that time, she was in a destitute home with no medical support, in agonizing pain, the maggots crawling far and wide. They took her in an ambulance, took her to a palliative care center, and I'll tell you the rest of that story later. Health is defined as this: physical, social, and mental well-being. When you go to hospital or when you take your mother to hospital, you don't get this. You are shortchanged. What you get are MRI scans, aggressive treatment often, aimed at the disease, and if the disease cannot be cured, sorry, you can take her home. And that is the huge injustice of the medical system. Rani's pain was not treated, his pain was not treated. The breathlessness or the maggots or the elements of suffering are not treated. Less than 2% of people get basic pain relief in our country. The poppy that we grow, the opium that we produce, gets exported to the Western world, earning us foreign exchange. Our own people are denied pain relief. Why? Because people in pain and suffering are weak, don't have a voice. They have no votes, and therefore their voice is not heard. Now, if you think that's bad, I would say Rani or people like her were better off than the rich person. If you have money in the pocket, when you have an incurable disease, what happens to you? Where would you be treated? Let me ask you a question. I don't want you to think about it, though all of us will die someday. But let me talk about myself. In the last month of my life, what are likely to be the important things for me? I don't have one, but if I had a Mercedes or if I had a mansion with a swimming pool, would any of that be useful for me? What would be important for me is physical comfort, not having to be breathless or wriggle in pain. But it's also important for me to have some family members around me, if possible, or anybody who will see me as a person and give me some love. If I can say a final word of farewell to my wife, or will have my son's hand to hang on to, I'll consider myself lucky. If I can get a kiss on my cheek from my grandchild, that will be bliss. But will my grandchild be allowed into the intensive care unit, where I will be confined to rigorous imprisonment for life with medically sanctioned torture? That's what intensive care units are like. I know they can save lives when lives are salvageable. But that is a horrendous way to die. And that's what happens to the rich man. Another error of commission on our part, would you believe it? 55 million Indians today are pushed below poverty line by catastrophic health expenditure, 4.2% of our population, and that number is growing year by year. The World Bank data show that India is among the worst 12 countries as far as destruction by catastrophic health expenditure is concerned. India and Bangladesh are among the 12. This actually destroys health, you see. Health is physical, social and mental well-being, and our healthcare system destroys healthcare for that 55 million Indians, destroying the next generation who don't get education and destroying the next one. The impact spans across generations. Let us change the story. Let us bring back the good part of the story. In the last week of her life, when that doctor and his medical student traveled to take her, she started calling her Anna, elder brother. And she said, Anna, I want a Fanta. She got a Fanta and an omelette on the road. She was taken to this hospice where she was seen as a person, given love. Last 7 days of her life, and everything that she was denied was requested. Can I watch television? That's after her pain was treated. And that vegetarian hospice arranged for chicken curry to be brought to her during her last few days. And that care with love was what reached Rani. That's what we could get across to the millions of people suffering with unrelieved pain, not only at the end of life. Whenever there is pain or suffering, if we take it our responsibility that it can be relieved, can be relieved. The World Health Organization defines health this way, and that, remember, not the circles, each encroaches onto the other. The woman whose breast has been removed has her sexuality challenged. That needs to be understood, not to be laughed at. The person whose financial destruction is complete is worried about the children's education. And the person in agonizing pain has no space for anything important to them. No space for love. No space for compassion to his own family, because his mind is completely occupied by pain. This conglomeration of problems needs to be understood and treated by our medical system, no doubt. But why am I talking about this to you all? Because really, if healthcare is physical, social and mental well-being and spiritual well-being, it cannot be given by doctors and nurses alone. A large part of the responsibility lies on the family. But now families are small. There is a huge problem that healthcare becomes very superficial, only what is in the surface, the disease. All the emotional issues, the relationship issues between the spouses, financial and spiritual issues, all are not seen. And that can be seen only if healthcare is given with love. That woman was laughing like that 10 days before she died. And that was made possible not only by doctors and nurses. You are the most important part of this. The social capital, the essence of goodness in the community, each one of us. See what has happened to our society over 2 generations. Families are becoming more and more nuclear. The small family is getting totally disconnected from the huge mansions of healthcare that are becoming bigger and bigger. They are totally lost there. What can be done? The transformation that's happening is creation of the meso element of the social capital. That's all of us. The local community, which has been destroyed by the last 2 generations of modern civilization, is being rebuilt. In Kerala, there are more than 320 small non-government organizations, each taking part in the care around them. This happened over a quarter of a century, starting with one. The compassionate communities evolved, and they get together, they see the suffering. It is not only orphans like Rani. There are millions in suffering. In my tiny state of Kerala alone, there are more than 170,000 elders living alone. Living alone means living without a maid or a home nurse, just totally alone. And when they fall ill, what kind of lives will they lead? What kinds of deaths will they die? That time, the community around them takes care of them, takes responsibility for looking after them, so that care reaches people in their homes. Home visits are done in all those 320 areas where people who cannot travel to hospitals are seen in their home, including medicines, and a doctor's visit when possible happens to them in their home. That's the transformation that became possible. This small boy's pain was treated by us, but our volunteers, ordinary lay people, collected small pieces of toys. That plastic thing in his hand, you wouldn't take a second look at it. But that changed the world for him, made him happy. That's the pinnacle of healthcare. And as I said, when the children drop out of school, the palliative care system in Kerala makes sure that their education is looked after. In Trivendrum alone, we now look after 360 children's education. And once that is started, we continue it till their education is complete. One of them is a doctor now. There are at least 7 nurses and many engineers from that group. But what are you going to do about it? This is not somebody else's problem. Disease and death happens in every family. It touches each one of us someday. Let me ask you, when is the last time you spent some quality time with your grandparent? The grandparent who spent precious time with you when you were a child? You go home and on vacation, you say, "Grandma, how are you?" And she raises her arm to clutch your arm. But you are busy. You are already late for that movie or that party. "Grandma, I love you." And you give a peck on the cheek and rush away. Give her half an hour. Next time, pick up a chair and sit beside her. See her. Maybe you will see the nails grown. just clip her nails and ask her, Grandma, tell me about your life. Then you will discover all those hidden stories in them which she has never ever had a chance to share with everybody, and she will give you gems. And when you acknowledge, really, Grandma, you fought your father to go to school, her eyes will light up. That will be healthcare. And should it be only to your grandparents? Are we not social animals where we work with people around us, and we work with people around us only when they are useful for us? Or will we do something for them even when they are not capable of it? And that care from the home extending to a friend, so there would be some student in this college, I am sure, whose family has been wiped out by an economic disaster or a death of a parent. Maybe just giving sympathy, oh poor chap, that would be cruel. What do you require sympathy? This could be me someday. What can I do to ease his pain for a minute? And why should it be only for a family member and a classmate? Shouldn't we be able to do it for a neighbor? And when I say neighbor, I do not necessarily mean the neighbor in your town. I mean also the neighbor around the institute. How many people would be starving or in horrendous illness like this just in an area surrounding this institution? If, as several educational institutions have done in Kerala, students' initiatives in palliative care happen, maybe the national service scheme or any group in the college, and if you start looking for suffering and start treating them, maybe this institute will be world famous for its compassion, for its empathy. We will walk with you on that journey if we have a chance to do so. And as a society, maybe someday, because the person in pain and suffering doesn't have a voice, maybe you can be that voice. This group of compassionate people getting together could be the voice for them. Why doesn't the healthcare system reach them? You have so many schemes in the government. Why doesn't it get to that person wriggling in pain over there? Somebody has to ask these questions. We need to be advocate. In a decent society, any healthy member of that society has a responsibility to be advocate for someone in suffering. As I am ending my talk, I have this question to ask each one of you. What is it you plan to do with this one wild and precious life? You have so many things to do, examinations to appear for, interviews to appear for, worlds to conquer, start a startup, so many things. At some point, you will ask yourself, what was the meaning of my life? Each one of those conquests of yours will lose its charm once you have got it. And at that point of time, that student in that Farouk college, for example, in Kerala, she or he will remember that the most precious thing was the look of happiness and the look of gratitude in the eyes of someone who was in intense suffering and who was helped by this. What do you get out of it? Someday, when you look at the mirror to clip your mustache or to put on a bindi, someday you may ask that image, what was the meaning of my life? If you have made a drastic change to someone else's life, you will be able to look at that image with self-respect. You wouldn't have to make excuses to that image and say, the whole world is like that. This is a commercial world. You won't have to make excuses like that anymore. You will be able to face that image with respect and try to remember all those good things that have been real treasures of your life. That handshake with gratitude, that small, worthless in the materialistic sense gift that somebody gave you, those will be the precious memories in your life. What can you do now? I am sure at least 1/3 of the people in this audience would have a story of pain or relief to relate. A family member, a neighbor, their agony, their suffering. As I talked about the person suffering in an intensive care unit, maybe you could relate it to one family member of yours, and maybe you are suffering now. Those stories are suppressed so that we at the healthcare system are able to do what we want. About 35 years back, I had not heard the word healthcare industry. We had only health service. With the first CT scan that came into the city, I found a personable young woman coming into my home, into the drawing room, introducing herself as a representative of the healthcare industry, asking me to promote her CT scan center and telling me that if I order at least 5 CT scans a week, 1/5 of the proceeds will come to me as an envelope every Saturday. That transformation of healthcare, which considers itself more successful if it can make more profit out of your suffering, which doesn't care for the 55 million Indians being pushed below poverty line within 1 year, can change only if we all become healthcare activists. Without you knowing, that injustice is growing. And I end my talk by asking you to think about this. Share your stories, maybe 1.5 minute videos that you click on your mobile phone and share it. Maybe each one of us can change the world. Thank you very much.